Thank you all for joining us today as we explore a day in the life of your multicultural campaign. The Polaron team would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their continued connection to land, sea, and the community. We have partnered up with Cornerstone Alliance to deliver this webinar. I'd like to start off with the agenda. We will firstly introduce our panelists and hear from Polaron's founder before moving to our case study, panel discussion, and finally finishing off with our Q&A. This is just a reminder that this session is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand. There is a live chat box where you can send through any questions or comments for the Q&A at the end of this webinar. First off, I would like to introduce Sunita Miranda, the Director of Cornerstone Alliance. Sunita has over 2 decades experience in journalism, communications, marketing, and engagement. Sunita has prepared a life cycle of multicultural campaign for us today. Welcome, Sunita. Next up, I'd like to introduce Shana Hui. She's the creative lead at Cornerstone Alliance and specializes in producing video, photo, and marketing content for multicultural and disability support clients. Wonderful to have you, Shana. I would also like to introduce our very own Carla Fuentes. She's the head of community engagement at Polaron Language Services and offers the unique perspective of working directly with multicultural organizations for their communication needs. Welcome, Carla. And I would also like to give a warm welcome to Eva Hussein, the founder and director of Polaron Language Services. Eva is a certified translator, interpreter, and a NADI certified examiner. Now, Eva, can you tell me a bit more about Polaron and the work we do for multicultural campaigns?
Sure. Thank you, Angela, and thank you everyone for attending today's session. We are very privileged to have Shana and Sunita here with us today, and of course, Carla. But look, when we started thinking about what to present, these webinars are held more or less monthly. We wanted to look at how does translation fit into multicultural campaigns. So that's our agenda, and Shana and Sunita will tell us about how they're crafted and how they are executed and how they can be measured and all of that. But really, our commitment and our passion is to create campaigns or co-create campaigns in a way that really resonate with the community. So we offer translation and interpreting services in about 170 different languages. But the frustration for us sometimes is to make sure that these campaigns actually work. So since 2000, we have been co-creating various campaigns with communities. So that is the topic of today's session, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And I am speaking to you today from our European office. So we do have presence in Europe. So I'm here on a fact-finding mission, and it's always good to see other perspectives and how things are done elsewhere. So thank you, Angela.
Perfect. I'd like now to pass it over to Sunita to tell us about the life cycle of a multicultural marketing campaign.
Thanks, Angelo, and thank you for welcoming us onto the panel today. I do also want to acknowledge that we join you today, Shana and myself join you today from Ghana country in the Adelaide Plains, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Also wanting to warmly acknowledge and welcome people from all cultural backgrounds and people with disability joining us today. So I was asked to prepare something about a day in the life of a multicultural campaign. That is a little bit tricky, so we thought we'd present more or less a life cycle of how a campaign unravels and is implemented and embedded into community. So this is me. Welcome to the presentation. So we basically start by discovering what it is the client really wants out of the campaign. So this is the stage that we call a discovery phase, where we sit together, we have quite an informal, casual conversation about what they really wish to do with the messaging that they want to communicate, what communities they wanted to go into, and write up a brief for them, take it away. The team comes together and strategizes and gives them a bit of a roadmap, if you'd like. So that's the start of the process. We call this broadly and loosely the discovery process. If you want to go to the next stage. In the process, we break it down into all of these different phases, as you can see on your screens now. Starting with research, crafting your message for you. That message needs to be quite succinct and concise. We typically use plain English. This is because that message needs to be translatable and easily translatable into several languages that need to go into community. The content that we create is in various forms, beginning with copy, you've got animations, you've got video. We usually start with high-res photography as well. This would be people from the community talking about those exact messages. We would have face-to-camera videos produced, or it could be just voiceover based animated videos, depending on how sensitive or how culturally appropriate those pieces of content need to be. The strategy then that helps drive this campaign into community is what we develop next for the client. This is something that we do in-house, and we also get the client stakeholder team engaged with us to agree or disagree, or even, you know, propose different ways of going ahead. Sometimes strategies can be phased out into different timelines. And this strategy needs to be kind of devised around budgets as well. So if you have a client that's wanting to implement strategy phase 1 in the financial year of the current financial year, you'd possibly start doing smaller campaign parts in that time. The second part of the strategy would then suit a broader spectrum, but a deeper engagement into community using better channel mixes. If you want to go to the next slide, Angelo. Yeah, maybe go back to the previous slide where we were talking about all the phases, because it's easier for me to explain that. Yep, thank you. The toolkit here is what we're going to use to break down your channel mix. So this is where I use a mix of maybe radio, social media, digital media. There might be even face-to-face community engagement forums that communicate the messaging into community. There is the option of video. There is also easier options to that, where you go SBS on demand ads just before the SBS shows come on board. You have these little ads that are shown to you, and some of them that you cannot skip. Those ads are ads that you can purchase and again use in your digital or your broader toolkit for marketing. There's also the option of actual broadsheet media print advertising as well, that still works in terms of some ethnic media. So again, a good way to go ahead. There is also, if you are trying to engage with community in the fields of health and medical research, or even community engagement related to health or social security, etc. A good place to market to people is also in clinic rooms. So try to think about advertising within clinics, within pharmacies, and point of sale screens that people are going to go to get their scripts filled, or are going to be sitting in clinic rooms waiting for their doctor's appointment. So that's a good place to market important health messaging to people. But then think about the content that goes onto those screens as well. Media, again, this is where people like us would finally devise a media strategy or a media plan for you, and then go ahead and buy those media spots to implement your campaign nationally, or again, depending on the targeted communities you wish to go into. Action here is basically getting it in train and getting your campaign live and running. Important part of the campaign is to keep a very close eye on the metrics. So basically tracking and monitoring, making sure there's nothing going bumpy. And if there's trends happening that show you that something's not going right, it is quite easy to fix this as well. So you have to just change some of the levers of your campaign, and you should be fine again. Reporting, important part of the campaign, especially when it comes to going back to your stakeholder and saying, well, this is how you spent your money and this is the impressions you got. We've had some really successful campaigns when we've worked in tandem with or in parallel with our clients closely. Those that don't engage too much and just give you a budget and run away, they don't seem to want to know too much, and that's okay. But we prefer clients engaging. We prefer clients being part of the action and wanting to know what's really out there and what's happening with their campaign. So that's my quick overview. There is one slide, I think, for the Disability Royal Commission campaign that we did for NIDA. That's somewhere down the line. Angelo, if you want to, yep, that's the one. Yep. If you go back 2 steps. Yep, that's the one. So this was a campaign that we did for the National Ethnic Disability Alliance not too long ago. And this was to get more feedback, if you'd like, and more comment and engagement from people from ethnic communities who live with disability. One of the faces in this campaign, as you can see, is a familiar face in Shana, which was really lovely. And we used just 3 words to say, share your story. That communication and that message was simple enough to translate into several languages, and it was embedded in various channel mixes. We got really good engagement. The best campaign was the digital marketing campaign, which we hoped would deliver about 1.5 to 2 million reach, which was a national reach. But we were very surprised, and pleasantly so, when it reached 5.5 million, which was great. I'm hoping that that translated into more feedback for the Disability Royal Commission from our segment, our target segment. So thank you for sharing that screen, Angelo. I'm not sure if there's anything further in there, but just wanting to leave it open for people to ask questions if they want. I have talked to all these points anyway, so thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And we are seeing questions coming up in the chat, and we'll leave them till the end. But so don't worry, we will get to ask them of our presenters. And on the screen there, you can see the website for Cornerstone Alliance, and I'm sure that both Sunita and Shana will be happy to answer any questions you will have. All right, so thank you for that summary, Sunita. And on to our panel discussion. So the purpose of today's session is really to dissect multicultural campaigns a little bit, and how do we begin? What do we do? Who do we go to? Like, how do we cut through the noise? Is it something that you can just purchase and hope for the best, or is it something, in fact, that you do need to engage with your provider, whoever works with you? And we do know that the multicultural campaigns are for real people that need to be doing something with the information that receives. So, for example, in the example that Sunita just showed for the Royal Commission, it was to amplify people's voices, but also to get they to provide feedback, which shapes and informs our policy. It shapes and informs how organizations work with us. So when we were designing this webinar, we were thinking about presenting all of that to you, and we do only have 45 minutes or so, but we'd be happy to connect afterwards. All right, so question number 1, and I'm going to tap Shana on the shoulder, because she's so very hands-on with the work that Cornerstone Alliance does. What does a typical day in your work life look like when you work on multicultural campaigns, Shana?
Hi, thanks for having me, by the way. It's been an honor to be here. So a typical day of working in a multicultural campaign, it looks like, because in the whole campaign, you have the research, the messaging, and everything. For me, the bulk of my work comes in creating the content. So in our team, we have graphic designer who will be producing the visuals. Our marketing officer will be now creating the written content, and I myself will be producing photos and videos. And we'll work together to make sure that not only all of that comes together well, but we're also making sure that the message of the campaign is coming through in all the languages correctly. And we're working with the client every step of the way to make sure everything is to their satisfaction. So my day will be like, I'll be checking in with the team and making sure that everything is now consistent across the board. And I'll be talking with the client to make sure that they're happy, we're happy, and we're all good to go. So that will take up the bulk of my time, and I'm usually the one doing all the support work.
Cool, thank you, Shana. Carla, we often are the bookends of a multicultural campaign. What I mean by that is that we might scope the service and then do translations before they are implemented into the campaign. What does a typical day look like for you when you are liaising with clients and communities on developing campaigns?
Yes. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, everyone that is attending this webinar. Of course, Sunita and Shannon too. Well, the first thing that we have to question and have a meeting with the client and really focus on who is the audience, what is the campaign for, what's the purpose, because in that way you can really identify what would be also the target languages. As Sunita said, it's important to use plain English or easy English, simplified English when doing an effective marketing campaign. That way we can also translate this information. And as we seen in the example that Sunita showed, really targeted a specific 3-word slide, very practical and easy to digest. So first, knowing what's the purpose, what's the target audience, what would be the target languages as well, because one could come from the same country, but there are so many dialects within a country. You should not assume that the top 20 on the list are going to be the ones that are going to engage with your multicultural campaign. So you have to really dig deeper into who's going to be using and who's going to finally see the resources of your campaign. So that would be the start, Eva. And I also start with a coffee, not a tea, because I need as much power as I did.
Fair enough, fair enough. And Carla, just before I ask Sunita a question, why is it important to work with Australian translators on multicultural campaigns that are for multicultural Australians? I know it's a no-brainer, but please explain.
Yes, of course, because they know the context of what is happening. There are so many differences between countries that one word can be translated in a different context. If you are not doing the translation in Australia for an Australian purpose or for an Australian multicultural campaign, you might do a mistranslation, or you might get out of the context of what you are really wanted to send the message of. So it's very, very important to work with translators that know the content, that know the Australian context.
Sure, thank you. Sunita, this work requires big brains, lots of creativity. It requires a lot of thinking, a lot of courage, right? Even like how does your day start? And we do want to know if it's tea or coffee, but that's okay. But also, you know, like this creative, brave, gutsy work. Do you always often have to convince clients to be a bit, you know, thinking outside of the box a little?
Well, thanks for that question. It's a twist on my day usually. No, clients are quite bold and gutsy nowadays, which is fantastic. But interestingly, we do have to veer them away sometimes from biases and misconceptions that they have of going one way or the other. And that's possibly my role, where I gently guide them back to where I think the project should land. So typically that's how I go about my day. if I am presented with a bold idea, I need to bring it in and think about how that would really impact, the content creation process, etc. It might just not work. So giving people, I think, that advice that that can be worked through is sometimes difficult, but it's interesting to see how it kind of pans out in the end anyway, and does end up being a fun, engaging project. Very often we go into a project thinking it's going to work out a certain way, and more often than not, we end up doing something completely different, but we've all learned from it, and it's always been an engagement with community. So it's always been a positive. So, yeah.
So how much of it is heart and how much of it is science, Sunita, when you do develop campaigns?
Good question. I think we as a team, we're very much heart led, which is great because we've got our hearts connected to the multicultural ethos and the multicultural spirit anyway. So there's a lot more that goes into it than just what is on pen and paper, and as well as our commitment to disability. So that's the reason why the project with NIDA for us became a really close alignment with who we are and what we do. And that's why that campaign, I think, to us is a personal success story as well. Yes, so definitely leading from the heart and hoping that we can make a difference and, get the messages out there where they need to go.
Cool, thank you. My next question is for Shana, and it's about ethics and being inclusive, Shana. So what does that mean to your work, that you develop your campaigns with that at the forefront of everything you do?
Okay, so I think I'll answer about the inclusivity part because that's something I'm really passionate about. And Sunita will cover the ethical part of working in multicultural campaign. So I myself have a disability. I'm hearing impaired. So as a woman with a disability, I'm very invested in being inclusive. So in the multicultural campaign, not only do we want to make sure that the message is correct and relevant, but we also want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone. So for me, that looks like making sure that all the videos that we produce have subtitles. So here impaired people like myself can still understand the messages. And other things that we also do is making sure that the text that we use in any production is nice and large enough sizes so that older people and people with visual impairment can read whatever content we have easily. And we also try to ensure that the fonts that we use are also accessible in as many languages as possible. So we'll research and make sure that we follow the recommended guidelines for different languages so that people with, how do you pronounce it, dyslexia, and can read them more easily. And also, we always check within our team, with our clients, and with our focus group within our target audiences to make sure this is understandable, this is accessible, and whether it resonates with them. And then I'm going to hand over to Sunita to talk about how do we make sure that we're ethical in our work. Over to you, Sunita.
Not before I ask you another question, just quickly.
Oh, yeah, sure.
How does technology come into it? Because it's a very, very fast moving space, right? So you have, nowadays you have automatically generated captions.
Yeah.
You have, lots of technological solutions. How does that fit into your daily life? Like, how do you keep abreast of everything that's happening and what good practice looks like?
Could you say that again? A little bit slower.
Just wondering how you incorporate technology into your daily practice to be sure that accessibility is at the forefront of everything you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are technology available like auto caption. Yeah, and then but sometimes auto captions are not always reliable. So we always try to make sure that we use we subtitle the videos ourselves so that they're accurate and on time. In other practices now, not just videos, but in images as well, we always now make sure that the files are, at a good size for everyone to use. That's about all I can think of the top of my head. Yeah. Eva. Does that answer your question?
It was, yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Sunita.
You're on mute,
You're on mute.
Sunita.
Thank you.
Technology.
Not very good at this, thank you. Yes, so with multicultural campaigns, it's come a long way, but in the beginning, when we first began doing more of multicultural campaign work, we found that we were brought into the campaign implementation process only after 1, 2, or even 3 rounds of the English version of the campaigns were delivered into the community. And I found it hard to do because it was not only was it tokenistic, it also dampened our own creative processes. We find that to be almost not only bad practice and bad governance, but also sometimes bordering on unethical, because people wanted to tick boxes of, yes, being compliant with diversity and inclusion practices by saying that they had run a campaign in 15 languages. But for me, as the, what would you call it, a custodian of that campaign, it was very difficult to get the best out of the campaign, and in fact even feel gratified from having done something like that. So we recommend strongly that agencies, organizations, individuals that run campaigns consider multicultural messaging and communicating with multicultural audiences right in the first instance. Australia is completely multicultural. This should not and never should be an afterthought. So it's important that you and I and everyone really here in this room remembers that multicultural campaigns really should be part of the normal campaign mix anyway, because the market in Australia is multicultural. It's not really only English-based campaigns. So, so in your most basic form, of course, your campaigns should be designed not only in word, but also in content. That would mean what kind of content have you used? You created, flyers, brochures, ads, videos. Whatever you've created needs to be inclusive and accessible to all. Some of the ways you can do that was presented to you by Shana, making sure your font sizes are good, making sure we've actually got a database of fonts that we use because those have been tried and tested and recommended for accessibility as well. Colors that you use in a campaign, consider people with color blindness, consider people with low vision. Everything really impacts the way that you go out and try to be as accessible as you can. If people have more of a budget, you could try augmented reality as well. That too has got quite interactive ways of being engaging and more engaging with communities that are low literacy as well, have low literacy as well. Easy read is something we also recommend for people with cognitive decline, like people with dementia or people with disabilities and having cognitive disabilities in particular. Please try to use easy read as a format when you are trying to campaign any messages for them and within that community. I think that's probably it from me and my notes that I quickly wrote.
No, that's great. And I think sometimes you just have to ask and be sincerely and genuinely curious. So when we were, working on developing this webinar, we spoke to Shana, asking her how she wants to be included. And it's never perfect. You've seen it. We failed. I had to repeat what I've said because I was too fast. All of that happens. But I think we do it in a inclusive way, in that we're seeing people you know, like whether it's at the end of a multicultural campaign or, you know, as part of this webinar, it's very important to ask people what they want and how they want the information presented. And, you know, nowadays you can do it through all kinds of means and technology. I think it's about respecting people over and above everything else. We have one more question, and I'll ask Angela to move us to there. Shana, that question is for you again. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've ever faced when working on campaigns? And how do you address them, I guess?
Yes. Okay, so one of the biggest challenges that we face when working on a multicultural campaign is covertly engaging with ethnic communities. So that's knowing their background, making sure the language is covered, and knowing which media platform to use to engage with the community. But this is where companies like Polaron, like yourself, will come in. So we will work with language and translation experts and combine our communication and engagement expertise to overcome challenges like this. That's about what I've got off the top of my head.
That's okay. That's good. Thank you, Shana. Carla, what do you think are the biggest challenges on our end, apart from the fact that people sometimes don't think that they need to translate, and they don't think that Australia is actually multicultural and that half of us were either born outside of Australia or have one parent born outside of Australia. And sometimes people don't want to pay for stuff, right? That's probably the biggest challenge for us. Tell us more.
Yes, I think we do really sit down and have this open and honest conversation with them. Also letting them know that writing or translating a written document is not as, you know, it could be even more expensive than doing a video, a short video, or doing really engaging social media tiles, that in the end, it might be the same price, but one is going to be more engaging than the other. So I think if we, that's one of the challenges too, to make them see and understand out of the box. Not only people are going to open the web page, download a PDF and read the PDF. There are so many other ways that not necessarily are more expensive, even it could be very budget friendly. It's just the time, we need time to better understand the purpose, the audience, and where is the audience, where are they getting the information from, and where they would like to get information from, and what format too. Some of them might like to do write in PDF format, but some others will prefer and will engage more with social media tiles. I think those conversations are difficult, but are very important at the start of every campaign.
Yeah, some really great points there. And I guess the other thing to say is that as much as it is a challenge, it's also an opportunity. And I think in a country like Australia, where lots of people speak other, languages other than English at home, it's an opportunity to inform, it's an opportunity to engage, but also provide a pathway to better services in the end. At the end of the day, I always think of myself, when I came to Australia with no English, like what is it that I need to know, or I would have needed to know? And how do you present that information in a way that's the fastest and the most effective? So Sunita, over to you now. What are some of the challenges at your end for you?
Thanks, Eva. I think just high level, when clients don't have any goals for their campaign, that's a little bit of a tricky one, because they come to us with an idea and a budget and a timeline, and say, do this, basically with no goals. And that makes it a little bit of a challenge, because again, like I said to you, there is no engagement at that point. For me, that's a personal challenge, because it's great to have people completely on board. Sometimes clients have unrealistic goals. That's another challenge for me personally. A third one that I wrote down is budget. There's no realistic budget, but there is lofty ambition, as you know, in your service as well. It cannot align, and it does not align, and it's difficult to convey this to the client as well. There are, however, the other clients who are fantastic and who go, yep, I know what this costs, because they're informed and perhaps have asked the questions before they came into it. Just to give you a bit of a sense here for everyone in the room who perhaps haven't had this journey before, a rule of thumb for your budget, if you are thinking of a multicultural marketing campaign budget, 40% of your budget is going to be spent on production. That would be creative production, content production, plus translations. 50% is going to be on your media spend, is where you wish to buy the spots to go and implement your campaign so people get to hear your message. And 10% is on project management. Now, that could be with a company such as ourselves or in-house with yourselves and your media and comms team. But that's 10% of your project cost anyway, because there's quite a bit of monitoring, tracking, adjustments, reporting required. So that's the breakdown. So that's 40, 10, and 50, just for you to know. Research, again, if research hasn't been done right and you just want creative assets to be produced and implemented, sometimes that campaign is a failure. And that's primarily because research did not align with what the community really wanted. So very importantly, spend your money on your research first before you think about going down the campaign way. And lastly, language. Very important again, if it's too complex, it really cannot translate well. So whatever you've put in your budget really won't give you the results you want if your language hasn't been simplified enough to be translatable. Thanks, Eva.
That's great. And we do have quite a few questions, so I'll move on to those shortly because we don't have that much time left. But you did, Sunita, touch on numbers, which is always great to see, because if we don't measure what we do and predict what will happen, then we could be throwing money into the wind, right? Like, so how do you measure effectiveness of campaigns, and what can you predict and what can you not predict? Like the campaign you showed us earlier, you were even surprised with how effective it was. But when you work with clients, I'm assuming that is something they would want to know. How are we going to measure the results?
No, every campaign that is implemented has within it built-in insights as well. So you would always know whoever you've chosen to supply that part of the campaign for you. So let's just say you've bought radio spots from a certain radio channel. You would be able to find out how many listeners there were at that time. So your message has possibly reached all those, car rides and people on their way to work or whatever. Similarly with TV, with print, your target reach. With digital, it's a lot easier and a lot more on demand. Definitely able to measure clicks, impressions, costs per click, everything. It's just a matter of being on top of it all. So it can be quite intense if it is a large campaign. It can also be quite challenging if it is a very short campaign. So both of those together are a little bit of a challenge, but again, it's quite fun working in that space. So
wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Sunita. So look, we have about 5 minutes and I can't believe how quickly the time has passed. I'm going to hand over to Angelo just to throw some questions at our panelists, please.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Eva. So one of the first questions that we got, this one will be directed at you, Sunita. What are some of the organic channels to engage multicultural communities, as a majority of families are not connected to mainstream social channels?
I think thanks, Angelo. I think one of the organic ones that ethnic communities use are WhatsApp. That's an easy way to start a campaign and get it viral pretty quickly. If you are of Chinese heritage, it might be WeChat or Weibo. Similarly, look for software that people use and communicate with each other in the community. I was surprised. Working with the Bhutanese community here in South Australia, we thought it would be WhatsApp, but they in fact said to us that they don't use Facebook, but they use Facebook Messenger. So that was interesting. That Messenger seemed to be the way they wanted communication sent to them. So always ask the questions. These are quite simplistic answers to get to. If you just ask the right people and the right questions, you should be fine. Or ask a company like, Polaron has connections into community. We can help. These are things that we would just be happy to just give you that information.
Yeah. And just to tag on to that point, there are lots of people who do not necessarily use computer, but mostly everybody has a phone. And a phone can be such a great way to reach to people, but to the phone or on the phone, they might have WhatsApp, they might have Facebook Messenger, who knows? So you really do need to go to the community. And when we work with clients, we also ask them, firstly, who they want to reach. And it may be a local library, or it may be a board in your local calls that the messaging needs to appear. It just really depends. And it's about knowing who we're working with or who we want to target. But I think most people do have a phone. And they do know how to use it. So sometimes it's a bit of a, we assume that people are not technologically savvy, but most people are in one way or another. It's just that it needs to be a simplified message, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva and Sunita. This one will be directed at you, Carla. I know we've done a lot of work on plain English, and one of our guests has asked, how do you define plain English?
Yeah. Thank you, Angelo. So plain English is a writing style that readers can easily understand, and it combines different things. So it combines clear, concise expressions, simple sentences, structure, and some design that is easy to navigate. So things like if you say, for example, forward, instead of saying forward, you can say send. It maintains the message the same, it remains the same, but you would use a word that is easier to understand or simpler. So that's it's a different way of writing the resource and the message in a way that is more easier to understand. That's plain English. And then the easy English, what's the difference between those two is the plain English plus images and design. So you can include more graphics, and instead of using too much words or too many writing information, you use more graphics or visual aids.
Definitely. Thank you, Carla. My next question is also going back to Sunita. This one is it's a bit generic, but who decides on the people who will be working in a specific campaign, I guess within your team?
So we've got a very small team. So it's pretty much, we all are part of the life cycle of the campaign. Jeremy here, who is in the background, and he's our anchor here. He looks after all of the scoping of the project, the determining of which segment we're going to target. Then there is Shana and the other creative people that put together the concepts that need to go to the client. I might be looking after the whole project management lifecycle, but the deeper diving happens at different stages, and that's led by different people. We've got another team player, Justin, that does the illustrations, the graphics. Someone else does animations. The team comes together to do videos if they need to. It's been quite a journey, and people who didn't have the skills in a certain area a couple of years ago now have them, because they've actually been able to translate into different projects and learn from different people within the team as well. So I think it's great that we all kind of are a little bit homogenous, that we can manage to work together to pull off a campaign. Jeremy is great at reporting as well. So that's another thing that goes back to the client at the end of it. So they can then take the report and hand it over to their sponsor, which is usually government or a larger organization that afforded them the funding. So that kind of closes out the acquittal process for them as well.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Sunita. Just before we wrap up, I will just pass it on to Eva.
Thank you. And look, just in relation to the question about what is plain English, it's a very important question, because there's a lot of confusion about what that actually means. But there is an ISO standard that is being implemented that's trying to quantify or you know, put it into a framework that people can easily understand. And whenever resources are developed, we'll be able to have a guiding document and principles. But guess what? We have run out of time. I can see how many really pertinent and interesting questions were being asked. So I'm so sorry that we do have to go. But we've taken notes of all the questions, and we're more than happy to have further discussions, because it does sound to me like there's a lot of interest and a lot of keen you know, support to doing it right, which I'm very excited about, because it is something that we also very passionate about, so that if people have budgets and targets, we want to be sure that whatever we help you develop is on point. So on the screen there, you can see everyone, everyone's details. Feel free to reach out. I did want to say a big thank you to Sunita and to Shantna for being part of this session today. Thank you for your patience with technology. That, you know, always happens. And also to Carla and Angelo for organizing it, and for everybody that's attended. This recording will, in the end, be available as well. And any questions, just feel free to reach out to us.